You know that feeling when someone pulls the rug out from under you, then blames you for falling? That's exactly where I found myself last Tuesday morning, staring at my computer screen while my COO, Adrian Blake, stood in my doorway with his face red as a fire truck. "Why didn't you flag that penalty clause?" he yelled, his voice carrying across the entire finance floor of Zen Advocates. I should probably back up here. My name is Riley Manson, and I've been the contracts manager at this sustainability consulting firm for 3 years. 3 years of meticulously reviewing every vendor agreement that crossed my desk. 3 years of catching overcharges, spotting liability gaps, and yes, flagging penalty clauses that could cost us thousands. But let me tell you how I got here, because this story doesn't start with Adrian's tantrum. It starts with me, fresh out of law school, believing that competence would be enough to earn respect in the corporate world. When I first walked into Zen Advocates, I was 26 and armed with a contracts law specialization that I'd earned through sleepless nights and student loan debt that still makes my stomach clench. The company was smaller then, maybe 40 employees compared to today's 120. Our founder, Rebecca Zhou, interviewed me personally in her corner office that smelled like jasmine tea and ambition. "We need someone who can think like a lawyer but talk like a human being," she told me, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that read, "Sustainability starts here." Too many contracts get signed because they're written in language that makes everyone's eyes glaze over. We need clarity. We need protection. But most of all, we need someone who understands that every contract tells a story about trust. I got the job that day. Not because I was the most experienced candidate, there were others with more years under their belts, but because when Rebecca handed me a sample vendor agreement and asked me to explain the liability clause in plain English, I didn't just translate the legal jargon. I told her a story about what would happen if things went wrong, who would be responsible, and how much it might cost us. "That's exactly what I mean," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Zen Advocates." Those first months were intoxicating. I was the contracts person, the one who caught the details everyone else missed. When our IT vendor tried to slip in a clause that would have given them ownership of our proprietary sustainability assessment tools, I caught it. When a major client wanted to add a penalty for late delivery but offered no penalty relief for their own delayed approvals, I negotiated a mutual accountability structure instead. I saved the company money. Real money. Documented money. The kind of money that shows up in quarterly reports and makes CFOs smile during board meetings. Then Adrian Blake arrived. Rebecca hired him 18 months ago, when the company was growing fast enough to need someone focused purely on operations. "We need systems," she explained to the staff during his introduction meeting. "We need someone who can scale our processes as we expand." Adrian came from a traditional consulting firm, the kind where billable hours matter more than actual impact, where presentations have 30 slides minimum, and where calling someone naive passes for constructive feedback. He had an MBA from Wharton and a resume full of corporate restructurings that, according to him, had optimized operational efficiency across multiple verticals. I should have seen the warning signs earlier. Like the way he'd interrupt our weekly team meetings to explain why our current processes weren't enterprise level. Or how he'd CC Rebecca on emails where he suggested strategic realignments of various department responsibilities. Or the time he told Amanda from HR that her employee satisfaction surveys were nice to have but not business critical. But I was focused on my work. Contracts kept flowing across my desk, and I kept catching problems. The Torres manufacturing agreement that would have locked us into a 3-year commitment with no performance standards. The Riverside Properties deal where their insurance requirements were so specific that we would have been liable for damages caused by their own negligence. The Summit Planning contract with Eventful Solutions that included charges for services we'd never requested. Each time I flagged these issues, each time I negotiated better terms, each time I saved us money or risk, I documented it. I kept a spreadsheet, call it professional paranoia or just good record keeping. Contract name, issue identified, resolution achieved, financial impact. By the end of my second year, that spreadsheet showed savings of over $300,000. I was proud of that number. More than proud, I was confident. Confident enough to ask for a raise during my annual review. Confident enough to suggest that maybe we needed a second contracts person to handle our growing workload. Confident enough to believe that competence would be recognized and rewarded. That was before Adrian decided my job would be more efficient under his operational optimization. The first change was subtle. He started asking me to CC him on all contract correspondence. Just to ensure alignment with our broader operational strategy, he explained. Then he began scheduling weekly check-ins to review contract priorities. Then monthly reports summarizing my activities. Then quarterly assessments of my strategic impact. Each layer of oversight came with the same justification: transparency, alignment, efficiency. Never mind that these reports took time away from actual contract review. Never mind that his strategic input usually meant asking questions I'd already answered in my initial analysis. Never mind that his presence in client calls often confused discussions because he'd contradict decisions I'd already made. The breaking point should have been the Morrison account. Morrison Industries wanted to partner with us on a massive sustainability overhaul for their manufacturing facilities. The contract was worth $2 million over 3 years, our biggest deal ever. But their proposed agreement was a disaster. Liability clauses that would have made us responsible for their regulatory compliance failures. Payment terms that stretched to 120 days. Termination clauses that gave them complete discretion to cancel with no penalty. I spent 2 weeks crafting a counterproposal that protected our interests while still giving Morrison what they needed. I researched industry standards, consulted with similar companies, and built a framework that would actually work for both parties. Adrian killed it. Not directly, of course. He was too smart for that. Instead, he scheduled a meeting with Morrison's legal team and, without consulting me, agreed to their original terms to move the relationship forward. When I objected, he told me I was overthinking the risks and that sometimes partnership requires trust. That contract is still giving us problems. Morrison has delayed 3 payments, citing internal processing delays. They've tried to expand the scope of work twice without additional compensation. And last month, they filed a complaint with the State Environmental Board claiming our recommendations weren't sufficiently comprehensive, a complaint that could have been avoided if we'd included proper scope limitations in the agreement. But when I brought these issues to Adrian, he just shrugged. Growing pains, he said. The relationship is more important than the paperwork. Until 5 days ago. 5 days ago, Adrian walked into my office with that particular swagger he gets when he's about to flex his authority. You know the type, mid-40s, expensive suits, and a habit of interrupting people mid-sentence because his time is apparently more valuable than oxygen. Riley, he said, not bothering to sit down, legal will be handling all vendor contracts going forward. The bigger ones, anyway. He shrugged like he was discussing the weather. Besides, you're too naive for the more complex agreements. Naive. That word hit me like a slap. I'd saved this company over $200,000 in the past year alone through careful contract review. But apparently, my careful attention to detail was just naivety. I could have argued. Should have argued. Instead, I did what I always do when confronted with workplace politics. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course, Adrian. Whatever you think is best." He walked away satisfied, probably thinking he'd handled another minor personnel adjustment with his usual efficiency. Here's what I didn't know at the time: our legal department consists of exactly one person, Olivia Martinez, a brilliant attorney who's currently juggling 3 major compliance issues, 2 pending lawsuits, and a partnership agreement that's been in negotiation for 6 months. Olivia is good, exceptional, even, but she's not a contract specialist. Her expertise is in regulatory compliance and intellectual property law. Ask her about EPA requirements or trademark disputes, and she'll give you answers that could win court cases. Ask her to spot a buried penalty clause in a vendor agreement, and you might as well ask her to perform brain surgery. I knew this because Olivia and I had worked together before. Last year, when the state updated its environmental consulting licensing requirements, she'd asked me to review the compliance language in our standard client agreements. "You understand the business implications," she'd told me. "I understand the legal requirements. Together, we make sure nothing falls through the cracks." That collaboration saved us from a regulatory audit that could have cost us our license to operate in 3 states. But Adrian didn't know about that collaboration, because Adrian didn't ask about our internal processes. He just saw legal department and assumed all lawyers were interchangeable. And here's what Adrian didn't know: the Greenfield Industries contract he'd personally fast-tracked contained a penalty clause buried on page 14 that would trigger a $50,000 fee if we failed to deliver our sustainability audit within 45 days instead of the usual 60. Actually, that's not entirely accurate. The penalty clause wasn't just buried, it was camouflaged. Written in the same passive, technical language as every other clause, sandwiched between standard liability limitations and routine indemnification terms. The kind of clause that looks innocuous until you calculate what it actually means. 45 days. Not 60. 45. Here's why that matters. Our standard sustainability audit for a company greenfield size requires site visits to 12 facilities across 6 states, interviews with approximately 40 key personnel, review of 3 years of environmental compliance data, analysis of energy consumption patterns, waste stream assessments, and preparation of a comprehensive report with actionable recommendations. Under normal circumstances, with proper planning and no complications, we can complete this work in 55 to 60 days. With the abbreviated timeline, we'd need to coordinate everything perfectly, no delays, no complications, no discovery of additional issues that require deeper investigation. When I first reviewed the Greenfield contract 3 weeks ago, I'd immediately flagged the timeline issue and prepared a memo explaining why we needed to negotiate for standard terms. That memo went to Adrian, along with a suggested counterproposal that would give us the usual 60 days while offering Greenfield a 5% discount for their flexibility. Adrian never sent the counterproposal. Instead, he called Greenfield directly and, according to his follow-up email, assured them of our commitment to their aggressive timeline. Apparently, he viewed my concerns as unnecessary caution rather than professional expertise. The kind of detail that someone naive might actually catch, if they were still allowed to review contracts. But here's the part that really gets me. I tried to warn him. Not just about the timeline, but about the penalty structure. In my original memo, I'd included a section titled Financial Risk Assessment that spelled out exactly what would happen if we missed the deadline. $50,000 in penalties, plus potential damage to our reputation with a client who represented nearly 8% of our annual revenue. Adrian's response had been a single line: "Riley, I appreciate your thoroughness, but let's focus on building relationships, not managing risks." Building relationships. As if 3 years of successful contract management hadn't been built on exactly that, understanding what our clients needed while protecting what we needed in return. So when Adrian came storming into my office this morning, demanding to know why I hadn't flagged the clause, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when someone shows you exactly who they are, and you finally believe them. "I wasn't reviewing that contract," I said, keeping my voice level. "Remember? You told me legal would handle it. You said I was too naive for bigger contracts." His face went through this fascinating color progression, red to purple to an almost gray shade that made me wonder if I should call an ambulance. "That's not," he started, then stopped. "You should have been paying attention anyway. You should have known." "Known what, Adrian? That you'd give me an instruction and then expect me to ignore it? That you'd call me naive and then blame me when your decision backfires?" The office had gone quiet. I could feel eyes on us from the cubicles beyond my door. Normally, this would mortify me. Today, it felt like fuel. I thought about Amanda from HR, who was probably hearing every word from her desk 20 feet away. Amanda, who'd been at Zen Advocates for 5 years and had watched Adrian systematically undermine the autonomy of every department head who dared to have opinions that differed from his. First Tom in IT, who'd been reassigned to a more junior role after questioning Adrian's choice of project management software. Then Lauren from Business Development, who'd been passed over for promotion after suggesting that maybe we shouldn't pursue clients whose values didn't align with our sustainability mission. I thought about Jackson Young, our newest junior analyst, who'd approached me last week with questions about contract language and his client agreements. "Riley," he'd said, keeping his voice low, "I know you're not supposed to be reviewing these anymore, but could you just look at this clause? Something feels off." He was right to be worried. His client was trying to add a non-compete clause that would have prevented us from working with any other company in their industry for 2 years after the contract ended. Not just direct competitors, any company in their entire industry. For a renewable energy client, that would have meant turning away every solar, wind, and battery company that wanted to work with us. I helped Jackson craft a response anyway, showing him how to counterpropose a more reasonable limitation that protected the client's legitimate interests without destroying our business prospects. We did it quietly, during lunch, away from Adrian's oversight. "Why are you helping me?" Jackson had asked. "I mean, I'm grateful, But isn't this exactly what Blake told you not to do? I'd looked at him, 24 years old, earnest, trying so hard to do good work in a company that claimed to care about making the world better, and I'd realized something important. This wasn't just about me and my bruised ego. This was about every person at Zen Advocates who depended on our contracts being negotiated properly. Every employee whose job security relied on us not accidentally agreeing to ruinous terms. Every client who trusted us to protect their interests while advancing our mission. Because it's the right thing to do, I told him. And because sometimes the right thing to do and the thing you're told to do aren't the same thing. Now, standing in my office with Adrian's face cycling through shades of fury and panic, I thought about that conversation. About Jackson, about Amanda, about every person who'd been quietly watching this company's decision-making process become more centralized and less informed. Look, Adrian said, lowering his voice and finally stepping into my office, we need to figure out how to handle this. Greenfield is expecting the audit by Friday, and we're not even close to being ready. And there it was. The real problem. Not my supposed failure to flag the clause, but the fact that they'd promised a 45-day turnaround without bothering to check if it was even possible. I leaned back in my chair and looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd undermined my expertise, dismissed my experience, and now wanted me to somehow magic away the consequences of his poor decision-making. Here's what we're going to do, I said. I'm going to call Greenfield and explain that there was a miscommunication in our contract review process. I'll negotiate an extension to the standard 60 days, which should be possible since we've worked with them before and delivered quality results. His shoulders sagged with relief. Good, good. I knew you'd. I'm not finished. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften them. In exchange for fixing this mess, I want my contract review responsibilities reinstated. All of them. And I want it in writing that any future changes to my job duties will be discussed with me beforehand, not announced as executive decisions. He stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking Mandarin. Riley, I don't think. Those are my terms, Adrian. Take them or figure out how to explain to the board why we're paying $50,000 in penalties because you decided legal was better equipped to handle something they never actually had time to handle. The silence stretched between us. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of phones ringing, the soft tap of keyboards from the cubicles outside. Normal office sounds that somehow felt different now, like the soundtrack to the most important conversation of my career. Finally, he nodded. Fine. We'll work something out. In writing, I repeated. In writing. After he left, I sat there for a long moment, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I picked up my phone and called Jackson at Greenfield Industries. 15 minutes later, we had our extension. 60 days, just like always. The thing about being called naive is that it assumes you don't understand the game being played around you. But sometimes, the most naive thing you can do is assume that competence and good intentions will speak for themselves. Sometimes, you have to speak for them yourself. That afternoon, I got an email from Adrian with the revised job description, spelling out my contract review responsibilities in detail. At the bottom, he'd added a line about collaborative decision-making regarding role adjustments. Corporate speak for, I won't throw you under the bus again without warning. It's not perfect. He's still the same man who thought legal expertise was interchangeable with contract management, who dismissed years of my experience with a shrug and the word naive. But now he knows that I'm not going to smile and nod my way through his next power play. And maybe that's the real lesson here. It's not about being right or wrong, naive or sophisticated. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let someone else's insecurity diminish it. It's about understanding that sometimes, the most professional thing you can do is to be unprofessional enough to stand up for yourself. Because here's what I learned in that moment when Adrian was yelling at me, competence without advocacy is just quiet suffering. And I'm done being quiet.